I didn't learn this till I was 54 years old. If I had known this way back when, I would literally not have been a walking red flag for most of my life. I would not have taken my stress out on my family. I would have been more peaceful and more powerful because I had no idea how much power I'd given to other people.
On this special Best Of episode of My Legacy, hosts Martin Luther King III, Andrea Waters King, Mark Kielberger, and Craig Kielberger explore what it really means to protect your peace, especially when the world is loud, messy, and demanding. Award-winning singer-songwriter Keisha Chanté on why walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The iconic Billy Porter on how he finally learned to set boundaries and work through his trauma. Deepak Chopra explains why peace in the world starts with peace within. And Martin reflects on a powerful lesson in forgiveness passed down from his grandfather. It's a masterclass in finding strength, clarity, and protecting your peace when it matters most. First up, Mel Robbins breaks down her viral Let Them theory, how it helped her stop reacting, start healing, and reclaim her power.
Mel, your new book, The Let Them Theory, it encourages people to just let control go over other people's choices.
Absolutely. So the Let Them theory is a simple mindset tool that helps you identify literally in a moment what's in your control and what's not in your control. And the way that you use it is very simple. If you're in a situation and some other person is stressing you out or upsetting you or offending you or you're worried about them or they're treating you poorly, you literally say, let them. Because the number one thing in life that you will never, ever, ever, ever be able to control is another human being. You can't control what they think. You can't control what they do. You cannot control how they feel, period. And any psychologist will tell you that anytime that you spend trying to only makes you feel more stressed out, frustrated, and out of control. And the problem for all of us, and I didn't learn this till I was 54 years old. If I had known this way back when, I would literally not have been a walking red flag for most of my life. I would not have taken my stress out on my family. I would have been more peaceful and more powerful because I had no idea how much power I'd given to other people. And nobody does, because we don't understand how we're turning other people into the problem. And I've got very important and exciting information. And it's this: if you feel tired in life, if you are frustrated, if you're stuck, if you're stressed out, if you feel like you never have time for yourself, if you're just not as happy as you'd like to be, the problem isn't you. The problem is you're unknowingly giving power to other people. And you do it in 4 ways. You allow them to stress you out. You worry about and you manage what they're thinking. You navigate your life based on their moods and their opinions and their disappointment and their guilt and their expectations. And you paralyze yourself because you're chronically comparing yourself to them and telling yourself that if they're successful or they're this, then I can't have it. And it's simply not true. And what the Let Them theory does is that any situation that you're in, and you're going to use it with your family more than anybody, because I think family teaches you how to love people you hate sometimes, right? You got to let them, because you're not going to change them. And what you will learn as you start to use this is people only change when they feel like changing. People only change when they're ready to change. People only change when they're ready to do the hard work to change. And the other piece that you have to embrace is that we think worrying about or pressuring or judging or pushing people to change motivates people to change. It's actually the opposite. If you look at the wiring of a human being, everybody has a fundamental need for control. When you're in control of what you're thinking about and your decisions and your future and the environment that you're in, you actually feel safe. And the problem is, if Martin's doing something that is worrying me, now his behavior is something I want to control. But Martin has the same need to control his life as I do. So when I start to push on Martin or suggest that Martin should do this or should do that, what does Martin do? Martin pushes back because he needs to be in control. And I didn't realize that I was creating so much unnecessary friction and frustration and distance with people in my life. I didn't realize how much time and energy I was losing because, let's just take a simple example. You're at the grocery store and there's 5 people in front of you. and there's one cashier. Beep.
We've all been there.
Right?
Yes.
And immediately the stress rises up inside you. And then all of a sudden you get agitated. And then you start thinking, why are they not calling on it? And then you're looking around, and then you start thinking you can run the store better than anybody, right? And now let's just stop and actually really look at what this is. This is you giving power to something that you do not control. And when you do that, a number of things happen. Number one, did you notice as the stress goes up, your life force energy goes out? So you are allowing stupid, meaningless, all kinds of irritating people that are beneath you and not worth your time and energy. You are allowing it to exhaust you. And you don't have to. And the solution is just to say, let them. And immediately you feel peace. Because what you're doing is you're tapping into a tremendous, I feel like I've got everybody's ancestors with me, because this is an application of Stoicism, of Buddhism, of radical acceptance, of detachment theory, of literally not reacting and staying in your peace. And then something interesting happens. You say the second part, which is let me. Let me remind myself that in any situation, I have power, because there are three things I can control. I can control what I think about next. I can control what I do or I don't do, because you can leave the supermarket. You could, if you never have time to talk to your friends, you could pick up the phone and call your friend or your grandma. You could practice meditation. You could say a prayer. If you say, let me, and remind yourself that you have power, right?
Love
and
that.
so that's what it is.
It also, you said, all of these different ancestors, you're bringing in the ancestor of Martin Luther King Jr. and the whole civil rights movement.
Yes.
Because I think what people also forget is that when you're talking about the lunch counters, when
Yes.
you're talking about the freedom riders,
Yes.
they trained.
Yes.
They didn't just go and, and so, and
To
a
be
lot of that
non-reactive,
was,
yes.
and it was a lot of what exactly that you're talking about, and let them. This is they're going to do this.
Yes.
I choose how then I will respond to that. And what I also think is important is it is training.
Yes, it is training.
It is, you have to think about it, and you have to.
Yes, it is discipline. And here's the other thing it is. Because a lot of people hear this and then they'll say, wait, you're just allowing people to walk all over you? You're allowing people to abuse you? And I'm like, oh no, it's the opposite, because you're actually allowing it now. When you say let them, it's almost like you're allowing it without allowing it, because you're saying, I see the reality here and I see that I can't control this. And so I choose my response because I know I do have power. And oftentimes the best response is no response. The best response is peace. And we give too much energy and too much fear into things we can't control. And in doing so, we blind ourselves to the fact that you always have control. And, I whether you're talking about a family dynamic, or you're talking about a community, or you're talking about a world at large, I find it just so sad and fascinating that we always let the most challenging and toxic behavior seem to get all the power. But I actually think the opposite is true. I believe that the person that is peaceful, I believe that the person that understands their power, I believe the person who actually constantly reminds themselves, wait a minute, I have power here, because I have power over my thoughts, I have power over my actions, I have power over how I allow my emotions to rise and fall. And it's inside that power that any single person can change something for the better. And, that's what...
Because you're responding and not reacting.
Yes.
And responding is when you come from a place of power.
Yes. And it's also how you take personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Let's talk about responsibility. Because the word responsibility is just the ability to respond. And everybody has that. And so when you really remind yourself of that, now you can be the person that changes everything, because it just takes one person to change the energy and dynamic in a family. It takes one person who cares enough to change the politics in a country. It takes one person to just shift everything. And if you don't like where you're at, or you don't like where your family's at, or you don't like something in a relationship, or you don't like something in the world at large, that one person is you. And as long as you give your time and energy, and you give other people power, their opinions, their all of it, none of which you can control, you are not present to the power you actually have and the time and the energy that you need to create the change that you're capable of changing.
And one of the things I admire about you, Keisha, is that, you have walked away from things when it didn't serve you.
Oh, yes.
How would you say to our listeners, what would you say to them about taking care of their mental health?
Mental health is a huge thing. I find it so fascinating that we speak on physical health and we separate mental health like it doesn't exist. Like, is your brain not attached to your body? Why is it separate? Why are we treating it as a separate thing? But there's something very humbling about experiencing depression. It's at your lowest moment where I've experienced times where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I am done. I'm tired. And it's, sometimes it's just a lot of maybe trauma you've experienced, and it gets overwhelming. But once you've made it out of depression one time, it renews your faith in God or whatever you believe in, right? For me, it was God. It makes your faith stronger, but it also makes you realize, like, I can really get through it. I just have to figure out what my game plan is to get out of it. So I would say, through my experiences in life, it's the falling and the getting back up that has allowed me to believe that there's more. And also, when you feel so close to not wanting to be here, or when you experience a huge death, when you lose someone, it really makes you realize how precious life is and wanting to maximize your time here. So I genuinely have this place of, like, I don't know what's happening tomorrow or the next week or the next month, but I want to make sure it's a good one. I want to make sure that I'm giving as much as I can. Like, when I leave the house, I try to be as intentional. Sometimes I'm having a bad day, or I'm struggling with anxiety or depression, and I try to still go out in the day and be as mindful and as self-aware as I can with people, because I want to pour into people as much as I can. So if I feel like something isn't right, immediately I'm like, this is a waste of time. No matter how valuable it could be to others, if I don't feel like it's right to my core, or it takes me out of alignment with my relationship with God, there is nothing more important to me than my relationship with God. So if it doesn't feel right, I'm good. I don't care how much money it is. I don't care how cool it is. If it doesn't feel right with me and him when I go to bed at night, I'm not doing it. So I have no problem walking away. And I'm lucky to have parents that are like, good on you. Do it. Yeah, girl. Yeah.
I think one of my favorite things over the last 10 years, I'll say, is people being much more open about their mental health and what it takes to keep your mental healthy, right? It's not hidden in a closet anymore. You can really say, look, I've gone through depression. I understand what it is, because there's something about not locking it inside that makes it freeing and helps you towards the positive. And so I love that through social media or whatever it is, mental health has been much more on a conversation, and much more people have been much more open about it over the last, it feels like 10, 15 years.
And let's just say it too, it's important for everyone's mental health. I think it's been so wonderful that in the Black community, that we are talking about mental health in ways in which we haven't, and I'm sure in all communities, but in the Black community, that we're able now to talk more openly about mental health. That's critical and so healing.
Yes.
I think. Yes.
Billy, you've been open about the profound pain you've worked through in trauma therapy. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that, and perhaps some of the meaningful breakthroughs you've had along the way.
The mental health profession and what they have developed over the years to sort of help people heal themselves, heal trauma, all of those things, it's extraordinary. And I began a very tailored process to my specific trauma in very specific trauma therapy during COVID in a way that I keep saying the world shut down so that I could address my trauma for real, and the thing I learned the most and I still deal with is the self-compassion component that all of us have to learn about for ourselves and for our mental health. Self-care and boundaries. The fact that I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know what a boundary was. And so I kept finding myself in relationships, particularly romantic relationships with no boundaries. Those are the two biggest healing components that I have taken away from that, in the practice, in the everyday practice.
Mary Martha, witnessing Billy confront and to start to heal from such deep trauma must be quite a powerful experience. What changes have you seen in him since he's began his own journey of trauma healing?
The self-compassion, seeing him learning how to say no. Billy is such a giver and always wanting to see everyone win, but sometimes, when we do that, to what end, at what cost? And so seeing him being able to say no and to take care of himself.
Billy, while happiness is often seen as the ultimate goal, it doesn't necessarily equate to a fulfilled life. What do you believe are the key ingredients of living a fulfilled life?
You have to choose yourself. There's no way to be happy when you're lying. One must choose truth. One must choose yourself. And I know for me, growing up in the church, one of the things that was very difficult for me was conflating choosing myself with being selfish.
Interesting.
And I think that's being illuminated these days in ways that, it's like, oh no, actually, because when I put my oxygen mask on first, which is a version of choosing myself, then I'm actually have more energy and more consistency
To help others.
to help others and to give to others.
Like, follow, and subscribe to the My Legacy podcast, and most importantly, share this with someone who needs a reminder of their strength today.
Deepak, you've said that the world is on fire, and so are we, and that the chaos around us is a reflection of our own inner state. How do we, as individuals, begin to create peace within ourselves so we can create peace in the world?
Mahatma Gandhi said the only way to change the world is to be the change yourself. So you have to be the change you want to see in the world. If you want peace in the world, start with your own peace. If you want love, then start giving love. Love can only be shared by those who know how to give and receive love. Peace can only be created by those who are peaceful, not by peace activists, but those who are at peace. And if you have a critical mass of people who want to be the change they want to see in the world, who are the change, a critical mass, that would translate into peace in the world. But you need that critical mass. Right now, the critical mass that we have is the recycling of trauma. So when we say, and the history of humanity is in a way the history of trauma, ever since the Middle Ages, we've recycled trauma. And the memory of trauma is anger. The desire to get even is hostility. Blaming yourself is guilt and shame. And then the depletion of energy that happens as a result is called depression, which is the number one pandemic recycling of trauma. So if we want to change the world, we have to stop recycling trauma. And that can only come about if we are at peace with ourselves. So as it's been said forever, peace begins with us, with ourselves. It's not happening because of the melodrama of social media, news networks, entertainment, where violence is romanticized. World War I, people who won the war, they get medals as heroes. The other side, war criminals. So, who's a war criminal, who's a war hero? What is war? It's murder. When you look at the history, and I hate to be apolitical, since now we have permission to be apolitical, but colonialism, slave trade, and piracy went together.
Yes.
Slave trade and colonialism and piracy are the same thing, but they were done under a uniform with medals. Long live the king, or long live the monarch. That has to stop. We have to stop glorifying trauma. Even now, Star Wars, the war against cancer, the war against drug, everything is a war. Our metaphors themselves. We're not talking about creative solutions. We're talking about war. I beat the cancer. I got rid of the cancer. No, there's a creative way to solve every problem. And that creativity comes from deep within our soul. So our soul, when we refer to God, we say the creator, right? So every act of creativity is a divine act. And that's not an algorithm. Okay? That is the spirit. That's the only way.
So certainly at 10 years old, I think many know that my father was assassinated. On that day of April 4th, my mom lost her husband, and the four of us lost our father. So that's the greatest trauma that I believe I had gone through in my life then. What none of us knew was 5 years later, my grandmother was going to be assassinated in the church while praying the Lord's Prayer. Now, people are always inflicted with tragedy, so we're not the first ones. We were not the first ones, but at an early age, it was the way it was not an accident. It was intentional. Someone came intentionally to kill Dad. Someone came intentionally to kill Dad's mom. And it really was how we chose to deal with it, by seeing we'd been taught as kids that to forgive that which is terrible, and nonviolence. Dad being the preeminent civil rights leader, one of the preeminent civil rights leaders in our society. We had been taught a strong foundation. We had a strong spiritual foundation, but still, it's tough. And what my grandfather did was he publicly stated, I refuse to allow the man that killed my lovely wife, nor the man that killed my son, to reduce me to hatred. I love everybody. I'm every man's brother. In fact, he went to visit the man who killed his wife. And he went down to the jail where the man was being held, because this was at the church.
The man who had assassinated your grandmother.
My grandmother.
During Sunday service.
And it was during Sunday service. Yeah. So Granddaddy that afternoon went down to see the man who was being held in the mental ward at the hospital in Atlanta. And he visited with him, and he said, son, why did you kill my lovely wife? And the guy looked at him and said, when I get out of here, I'm going to come back and get you. And Granddaddy said, well, son, I'm going to pray for you, because that's who he was and what he believed. Interestingly enough, if he had taken he had a cane, he walked with a cane back then, but he could have taken that cane and hit the man in the head. But he did not do that. He said, son, I'm going to pray for you, because I know prayer changes things. Now, that's a powerful example. I was not physically there that day, but my brother and my cousin were. And so to hear this story shared over and over again made a profound impact upon me. So I share this story often with young kids because I believe that there's merit to, again, if I had been bitter and hostile, people would understand. But I'm thankful that I chose to exhibit what I call positive energy and saying, oh, that greatly impacted my life, but I choose not to go continuing to hate others. Hate can never solve the issue. Only love can do that. Dad would say darkness can't put out darkness. Only light can do that. I hope that every time I have an opportunity, I am depositing energy, positive energy, light into the world.
Thank you for joining us for the Best of My Legacy. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a moment.